Survivor first and foremost is a television show, and of course the whole point of all TV shows is to make money. This puts a ton of pressure on the producers to make the product as good as possible. Also, production spends so much time with the Survivor players and watch their games 24/7, so it's only natural that they start to develop favoritism towards certain players. So, when you combine making a great season storyline along with helping or hurting certain players, sometimes Survivor can't help itself and attempts to rig certain parts of the game. What's going on, guys? I'm FlynnMasters, and today we'll be looking at some of the most famous instances and claims of rigging in Survivor. Now, none of these moments are for sure confirmed, but there is a ton of speculation, and a lot of these moments do make you question the integrity of Survivor. Before we begin, don't rig my channel and hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed these videos. With all that said, let's get controversial and look at some rigged Survivor moments. The first instance of rigging in Survivor resulted in a court case when Stacey Stillman sued the show for rigging her elimination in Survivor Borneo. Yes, it took a mere 3 episodes of the show before the producers got involved. At the final 14 of Borneo, the alliances were clear on the Tagi tribe. The trio of Rudy, Rich, and Sue were all older and hard workers and really respected each other, while the young girls of Kelly and Stacey were tight, as they were against Rudy's bossy attitude. You then have your two goofballs of Dirk and Sean as a pair, which leads us to the third tribal council of the season. Rich, Rudy, and Sue planned to vote for Stacey, while Stacey and Kelly were voting for Rudy, which left Sean and Dirk as the swing votes. The reason why Stacey sued the show was due to her believing that production heavily influenced Dirk and Sean's decision to vote out Stacey instead of Rudy. Now, none of us are in Stacey's shoes, and we don't know for sure how much production truly got involved, but I'd be lying if I said I don't think there was some truth here in Stacey's rigged elimination. First of all, Rudy was absolute comedy gold, and the producers knew they were likely in danger of losing an all-time great character very early in the season. Secondly, the first 2 eliminations of the season were 63-year-old Sonia and 64-year-old Bibi. If Rudy would have been the third boot here, that means the first 3 eliminations of the season would have been old players, which would have been a terrible look for the show, as the whole point of Survivor early on was that anyone could win this game. And lastly, it's not like Stacey was making crazy claims in her case. She specifically mentioned production pursuing Sean and Dirk. And let's face it, you would think that Sean and Dirk would join the younger woman of Stacey and Kelly as opposed to the older and more serious group. Now, do I think production specifically told Dirk and Sean to vote for Stacey? No. But I definitely think production made certain types of comments during their confessionals that persuaded them to save Rudy, which, let's face it, would turn out to be a game changer for the show, as Rudy went from third boot to final 3, becoming an absolute legend of Survivor in the process.
You know, he's fat, but he's good. But anyway, me and Richard got to be pretty good friends. Not in a homosexual way, that's for sure.
Speaking of legends, Survivor All-Stars gave us some of the biggest legends the game had ever seen up until that point, with pretty much every big name from the first 7 seasons coming back to battle each other. So the producers were probably devastated when the best of the best were taken out in the pre-merge, and by the time the final 10 came around, it looked like Rob and Amber, 2 of the lesser-known All-Stars, would dominate the season. But at the final 10, which was the usual time to merge in old school Survivor, there was a third tribe swap, and it just so happened that the tribes remained exactly the same, with the only person switching being Amber, who also just so happened to swap into the tribe that had lost the past 3 immunity challenges. The belief here is that the producers wanted to break up Rob and Amber by intentionally screwing over the less entertaining of the 2 in Amber. At the tribe swap, it's believed that the players were put into a specific order to pick the buffs, with the buffs being placed on top of each other, giving the players no choice but to grab the next buff in line. This is one of those too suspicious to look past moments, as yes, while it may have just simply been a massive coincidence, what are the odds that the person most screwed over is the person who is arguably the least deserving All-Star in a showmance and had a real good shot of winning this All-Star season over all the other big names. Of course, Amber would be saved by Rob's last plea to Lex, and Rob and Amber would go on to dominate the season anyway, but I can assure you that Amber winning All-Stars was probably worst case scenario for the producers, and unfortunately, I can see this tribe swap being a legit rigging against Amber.
I definitely feel like I'm the one who got screwed in this whole situation.
In the Cook Islands, we have one of the more infamous moments of possible rigging in Survivor. At the final 11, the I-24 were in the minority against the 7 Raro members, and of course the reason for this was due to Jonathan and Candace jumping ship to the Raro tribe. Before the final 11 immunity challenge, Jeff introduced the bottle twist and said that the losing tribe would open the bottle at Tribal Council. Raro would end up losing immunity, and after they voted out Rebecca, they expected to open the bottle, telling them to go to I2's camp for a merge. However,
you've just voted out one member of your tribe. You will now vote out another. That's not fun.
Definitely not a merge.
While the bottle twist is definitely BS, it's not exactly rigging per se, but some Survivor fans think there are 2 different bottles, and if I2 lost the challenge, their bottle would have in fact been a merge note, or at the very least, something different than voting 2 people out. It's rumored that there were 2 bottles that the producers got to choose from, and once Raro lost the challenge, they were given the second vote off twist bottle. Purdium has talked about this before, and I 100% take his side on this, in that there was only 1 bottle, and the producers were willing to risk it. Because honestly, Survivor had to take a risk at that point, as a white winner this season could have possibly ended the show, especially if the 4 white players made up the final 4. Production likely knew that the team with Ozzy would always win the challenge, which is why they put this twist in, hoping the I-2-4 would win this immunity and make the numbers 5-4 in favor of Raro instead of 6-4, which likely would have resulted in a begonging. This of course would now mean the I-2-4 would just need 1 person to flip, and at worst, they would be guaranteed even numbers at the final 8 due to Yule's Super Idol neglecting the votes at the final 9. To be honest, the whole season of the Cook Islands seemed like one big rig show to ensure we had a diverse endgame, but again, I truly don't think Survivor would still be on if Adam frickin' Gentry won the Cook Islands, so I can understand why the producers did what they had to do this season. So we just got done talking about how production tried to rig Amber's elimination in Survivor All-Stars. Well, after she ended up beating Rob, Survivor tried to make up for their failed efforts in an attempt to give their golden boy $1 million. In Survivor Redemption Island, the 2 legends of Russell and Rob were brought back as captains for their tribe. And let's face it, as much of a draw Russell was for Survivor, production would 100 out of 100 times want Rob to win over Russell, and people speculate production did as much as they could to help both the returnees, but specifically Rob, to win that season. First of all, just look at the theme of the season, Redemption Island. For the first time ever, players knew that once their torch was snuffed, their games weren't over, as they would have a second chance to re-enter the game through duels. Pretty ironic this twist is introduced on a season where Rob and Russell are captains, 2 very worthy challenge competitors. But the main reason why people think this season was more so aimed for Rob was due to the tribe dynamics. In a once again suspicious buff draw, Rob went first and ended up drawing the Ometepe buff. I mean, the Ometepe tribe may be bigger fans of Rob than Jeff himself. Okay, maybe that's a stretch, but still, you get the point. The tribe consisted of 3 extremely young and pretty ladies in Andrea, Ashley, and Natalie, who of course would fall for Rob. You then have Grant, a former NFL player who was all about loyalty, and then of course Phillip, the definition of a goat, as Phillip literally admitted to riding Rob's coattails to the end. You compare this to Russell's tribe, where it consisted of more older players who wouldn't be as memorized by the legend, and it just seems too suspicious. Fans once again believe that production put the Ometepe buff in a certain spot and had Rob draw first, with some people even speculating that Jeff gave him a certain look to cue him which buff to grab. Then, at the final Redemption Island duel, Rob basically had the game wrapped up. The only thing that could stop him was the challenge beast winning their way to the end. So, in a challenge consisting of Matt, Grant, Mike, and Andrea, the least physically threatening of the 4 in Andrea won her way back in, with many people thinking this challenge was much more geared for a weaker female to win. While there's not one specific thing that's obviously rigged this season, let's be real, Redemption Island was clearly designed for Russell or Rob to win, with Rob having the upper hand, leading to arguably the easiest win in Survivor history.
And I can say that I wouldn't be sitting here right now if it wasn't for Boston Rob. I thank him for that, Boston Rob. His true name is the mastermind. He came up with the total concept of how we should go forward, and I implemented it. And so I feel that's what got me here today, and maintaining my loyalty to Boston Rob.
In Survivor Cagayan, we saw one of the most dysfunctional tribes in Survivor history in Luzon take center stage in the pre-merge, as it featured some of the worst players in all of Survivor. Some of those players include David Sampson, who literally openly targeted the biggest threat in the game, leading to him being the first boot. Garrett was built like a brick wall, yet he was blindsided over a woman who dumped out the tribe's rice. And speaking of that woman, of course there's Jatia, one of the worst challenge performers of all time, and acted like a psycho lady at certain points during the game. Yet, despite her terrible gameplay, she was in the majority with Cass and Tasha, with Spencer being on the outside. Spencer was a student of the game, and was basically carrying the brains on his shoulders during the challenges after Garrett's blindside. But due to his previous association with Garrett, Spencer was a target for the brains heading into their third tribal council. But Tasha and Cass decided to spare their challenge threat and eliminate Jatia. However, it's been confirmed by Cass that Jeff basically berated the two for over an hour on how stupid they would be if they kept Jatia over Spencer. Now, Chaos Cass isn't the most reliable source in the world, but I'm sure there was some truth here. Jeff gave Spencer no chance coming into the season, and to see him be in trouble despite playing so well and giving it his all had to drive Jeff crazy, especially considering it was the terrible gameplay of Garrett and Jatia that put Spencer in a bad position. Whether Jeff made a comment or two about how Spencer was a better asset, or went full on bias mode for Spencer that night, can you really blame him for wanting to spare Spencer over Jatia after seeing firsthand how the season had played out up until that point? Speaking of Spencer, he said himself in a recent AMA that production talked him out of blindsiding Jeremy at the Final 5 in Survivor Second Chance. Now, Spencer has gone a bit crazy recently, but still, production influence is very normal in Survivor, and while we don't know the full extent of their persuasion, I think this officially confirms the fact that whether fair or not, production does try to influence certain decisions, even when it could possibly be a $1 million decision. Let's now talk about the most recent case of rigging in Survivor, and potentially the most obvious as well. We all know the story of Ben, and why many people think he's the worst winner, as not only did he need a bunch of idols and twists to get to the end, but most, if not all Survivor fans, think these idols, and of course the forced fire making challenge, was rigged in Ben's favor. So what's my stance on this? Well, I agree with most fans when it comes to the idols. The first two he found were legitimate, but that third one, come on, putting it right next to where he sleeps at night is a bit too much. Now, to be fair, I think the rest of the castaways should have literally followed Ben all night to ensure he didn't find the idol. I mean, they were so convinced Ben would fall for Chrissy's fake idol that they all pretty much stopped paying attention to Ben at that point. So while I do think production absolutely rigged this third idol, it's not like the other 4 players did much to stop Ben. But then the big one, the forced fire making challenge. Yes, I get it, this twist just happened to be introduced when a former Marine had no more idols to save himself. The suspicion is obvious, but I truly believe this twist was coming no matter what this season. I mean, just look at the fallen angels of the past couple seasons. Players like Wentworth, David, and Ty were basically all but done the second they lost the final immunity challenge, and you know that must have drove Jeff and production crazy. At the very least, this twist was coming as soon as production's favorite was in trouble, which just so happened to be Ben. And while that's definitely still rigging in a way, I don't think this concept was created at the last second with the sole purpose to save Ben like many people claim. But even though I am higher on Ben than most people, it's still really hard to not think of Ben as the most rigged winner in Survivor history. So those are the big cases in Survivor of rigging. Let's now talk about a few smaller ones. It's believed that Edge of Extinction was rigged for Joe to win, and as crazy as it is to believe, he was a couple inches away from re-entering the game and possibly winning. People also think that producers put all the weak players on the Leslie tribe to take the target off of David and Wentworth. The fake merge of Thailand was believed to benefit NYC police officer Ken, as it looked like Sheehan was going to flip on Sukjai, with Ken possibly being the merge boot. So production held off on the merge in hopes of Sukjai winning the next 2 challenges, which at that point would protect all of Sukjai from Sheehan flipping. And given that Thailand aired a year after 9/11, it made sense that the producers did everything they could to help out Ken, as him winning Thailand would have been an amazing look for the show. Production has also scrapped plans at the last second so things play out more to their liking. For example, it's believed that Palau is going to have a tribe swap, as that was starting to become the norm, but due to Oolong's losing streak, Survivor wanted to see just how bad it would get. At the final 10 of Survivor Gabon, Survivor threw in a tribe swap at the last second to shake things up, as the Onion Alliance looked to dominate the post-merge. In fact, the final 10 challenge ended up being an individual challenge, despite there still being 2 teams, making it all that more believable that production wanted to screw over the Onion Alliance. I mean, yeah, Crystal, Sugar, and Kenny made for better TV over the likes of Bob, Marcus, and Charlie, but man, we really were robbed of Randy possibly having a legit shot to be a Survivor winner.
I left the auction broke, full, half drunk, and pissed off. I got a little room left for one big cookie, so I'm gonna burn this house down in the next day or so.
So there you have it, guys, the main instances of rigging in Survivor. Once again, if you like this video, then be sure to smash that like and subscribe button, and let me know down in the comments what you think the most rigged moment in Survivor was. With all that said, thanks once again, guys, and remember, never ever trust a reality TV producer.